The lesson this morning is going to be a little different from normal. For one thing, I have 16 pages, but don't fret. I'm only going to share a few of these with you. It's thoughts on grief. Some statements are my thoughts. Some have come from the, 10 or so books I've read the last few weeks. I thought I knew what grief was, being a preacher for 30-something years and dealing with it. I had no idea. I do not expect some of you to understand everything I'm going to say today, unless you've been in our shoes. For example, this auditorium for me right now is the absolute hardest place to be. It's not one day at a time, as the old saying is. It's literally one moment at a time. And when we lose someone, we sometimes believe God has abandoned us. He hasn't. We often feel as if nothing matters, but it does. And there are times we just think, life's really not even worth living, but it is. After a loss, our pain is shouting. But we know someday it will whisper. A traumatic experience literally disrupts the functioning of our minds and really our ability even to reason. It literally overwhelms even your coping ability. Trauma shatters our beliefs and assumptions about life. Trauma challenges our beliefs that we have the ability to handle life. And trauma leads to silence. We don't have words to describe it. Trauma leads to isolation. No one seems to experience or to understand the experience we had. Trauma literally leads to feelings of just helplessness and hopelessness. I haven't lost any of my faith in God, but if I'm totally honest with y'all, I've lost all faith and confidence in my ability to preach. I'm still torn on that. I'll leave that at that. Our family has become flamingo fanatics, though, haven't we, through all of this? What I know in my head has to overcome the way I feel in my heart. I know God's good, and He promises us a joyful, abundant life. But there's absolutely nothing right now that feels joyful. I know someday we'll walk out of this valley of darkness, but right now it's hard to see, any light. For years I've prayed that God would take care of my children, my grandchildren, and my family. I prayed that they would live long lives, glorify God, and I prayed God would take me first. But for whatever reason, God did not answer that prayer. And if I'm totally honest, it just feels like God failed me on that one. I know we'll get over this, but God will help. I know we'll never get over this, but God will help us get through it. We will learn to cope. We will learn whatever our new normal will look like. One thing I've learned, because I listen to Christian music all day in the office, is that I no longer hear the music, but I hear the lyrics. I know there have been blessings from God through this tragedy, and as a family, we've even talked about many of those blessings, but that still doesn't seem to take the hurt away. God, where are you? Where's God when life hurts? What to do when God's ways make no sense. Not supposed to be this way. I mean, just a few questions and thoughts that I've had, and I know that many of you have had through the years because of your experiences in life. Here's something you may not agree with, and that's fine, but the old phrase, time heals all wounds, I don't believe that's true. Unless we keep God our focus, time will not heal any wounds. Time won't heal wounds, God can. You know, it's okay to be angry, mad, disappointed, dejected, confused, and a host of other feelings towards God. The Psalms are full of that. And when we have those feelings, take those to God. I mean, God is bigger than our emotions. God has shoulders big enough to handle our pain. You know, one of the things I read is so true. Don't expect life to get better anytime soon. Hard days are ahead. Sleepless nights are still on the horizon. Days of continual numbness lie ahead. One thing that's been very clear in everything I've read, do not try to rush grief. I mean, in fact, books have said that unexpected tragedies, you know, can take 3 to 4 years before you kind of get back to whatever the new normal is. And one thing we've discovered when one of our family members have been weak, God's allowed someone else in our family to be strong. And it's the strength and faith that we have as a family that'll help us out of this dark valley. You know, since our tragedy, the last thing that I've wanted to do is visit with people. I mean, I've literally turned inward. And I know I'm not the person that I used to be. Please be patient with me and our family. You know, I have gone from not being able to stop crying for 2 weeks to actually the last 2 weeks becoming literally just numb. And, you know, and now I'm feeling guilty that I'm feeling numb. The hardest part of healing after you've lost someone you love is to recover the you that went away with them. When we lose someone we love, we must learn not to live without them, but to live with the love that they've left behind. You know, the Lord's just as trustworthy in the storm as He is in the calm. And I guess the real question is can we trust the Lord in the midst of a storm? Because that's when we need Him the most. And you know, one of the biggest challenges is being able to keep our faith firm even when our hearts are broken. What do you do when life falls apart? And you've heard me say this a lot. You turn to the Psalms, because the Psalms are God's prescription for grief recovery. I just want to read you a couple of these Psalms. Psalm 11, 3 and 4 says this: "If the foundations are destroyed, what can the righteous do?" And the psalmist poses that question. Then the next phrase he says this: "The Lord is in His holy temple. The Lord's throne is in heaven." So I think the psalmist is telling us when our foundations are destroyed, we've got to run to the throne of God. Psalm 30 verse 5, "Weeping may last through the night. Joy comes in the morning." Psalm 34:18, "The Lord is near to the brokenhearted, saves those who are crushed in spirit." Psalm 69, verse 1, "Save me, God, for the waters have threatened my life." One more, Psalm 109, 22 through 26. I'm afflicted and needy, and my heart is wounded within. My knees are weak, my flesh has grown lean. Help me, God, save me according to your loving kindness. One of the other things I read is that grief cycles. It comes and goes. You know, it goes down to the memory of our hearts. We cry, we feel empty, we continue to function. Normal grief has not one beginning and one ending point. It ebbs and flows, it gains intensity, and then it slacks off. You know, some things cannot be fixed. They can only be carried. Every object in our lives becomes an artifact, a symbol of the life that used to be and, you know, might have been. And there's no place this loss has not touched. And grief is just a natural response of love. You know, what we're living, painful as it is, it's love. And love is really hard. In fact, it's just excruciating at times. But I think little by little, pain and love will find ways to coexist. You know, being strong is not about overcoming what hurts. Being strong is about waking to face each day when you'd rather not wake up at all. And you know, in grief, mental confusion and a sort of brain fog feelings, I mean, every book says that's extremely common. When we feel anxious, make our inhaling of God's grace more than our exhaling of grief. You know, your entire world can crumble and love will never leave. Love is with us. Love is what sustains us. And God's love is what will carry us. Everyone hurts and grieves differently. And there's no way to predict how we will feel. You know, the reactions of grief are not like a recipe that you just have specific ingredients and certain results and you follow it. Every person mourns in a different way. You know, we may be calm one moment and in turmoil the next. So we need to make sure that we heal in our own way. And you know, mourning is the second part of the grief experience. It's the process where grief is expressed, and it's natural, it's given to us by God. And you know, grieving is a disorderly process. I mean, there are times you just can't control it, and we can't schedule when it's going to come out. I listened to this because in reading one of the books, it made a lot of sense to me. Our grief will take the shape, it says, of a spiral figure rather than a linear one. Let me explain what that means. Grief is not a straight line moving gradually up and toward a set point. We will move forward only to find ourselves returning to where we were. We can literally be ambushed by grief. One of the books, and I like the analogy, they called it a grief spasm. it hits at the most unexpected time. I mean, just a couple other things here, and I'll close. Shock. It's natural, God-given protection. It's almost as though God's given us a bit of anesthesia. It insulates us from the intensity of our feelings of loss. But here's the thing, once the shock and denial wears off, reality hits, and that can be even more painful. You know, asking why and how long is nothing new. You know, the Psalms are filled with whys and how. I mean, Psalm 10:1 says, why does the Lord stand far off? Why does the Lord hide himself in times of trouble? Psalm 13:1 says, how long, Lord, will you forget me? How long are you going to hide your face from me? And you remember David was the first one who made this statement in Psalm 22:1, my God, why have you forsaken me? And we know Jesus even asked why. He asked that same question at the cross. There are no shortcuts to grief. There's no magic slogan. There's no magic words that you can just suddenly snap out of it. But the good news is Christians, we're stronger than we think we are. And that's because of God's available strength. Let me close with with this. Our prayer is that we'll be honest with ourselves, letting out what is within, refusing to govern our way of grieving by what others think we ought to do it. That we allow our loved ones the same right to do their own grieving. Never assuming that they should want to cry when we feel like crying, or talk when we feel like talking, or just sit and stare. My prayer is that we will be able to experience good, godly grief. That we will be able to experience God's peace, and that we will cling to hope, which is the anchor of our souls. Drew, come lead us in a song. If you need to come, won't you, as we stand.